All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Morbid Symptoms live stream. I'm here with now who I can call friend of the show, since this is his third or fourth, I can't remember, third appearance, I think. So, welcome back, Benjamin Studebaker. I asked him in a chat, I said, hey, man, this political stuff's crazy. Let's try to do a Game of Thrones every 2 weeks or so where we go through kind of a roundup and get your take on things. So that's why we had the where I opted for the Game of Thrones kind of theme. Um, and for those of you who are serious, hardcore Game of Throners, both, and I guess that would be mainly the people who actually are true to the text, please don't come at me if you don't like the people I chose to do the face melds with. I realized that there could be some, I was under pressure, and I'll be honest, I watched the series, I didn't read the book, so if someone's offended that I merged Trump with Robert Baratheon, I do apologize. But I thought I don't know, it made sense to me at the time. Anyway, Benjamin, how are you doing? How are you
I'm
enjoying this
good.
political show? I mean, not this one, but like in general.
I'm doing okay. The country may not be, but I'm okay.
Hanging in there. Yeah, so what we're going to do is, and we realize there's serious issues. We're not idiots, but it's kind of like, why should we take it more seriously than the people involved, both the candidates and the people behind them in the media and all the punditry and whatnot. I mean, they might think it not that way. So it's a
You
serious
go to
issue,
the
but having
Harris
some fun.
website, and there's no policy on the website. There's
Yeah.
nothing, no issue
Hey, yo,
statements.
don't steal the thunder, man. You'll get your chance.
Yeah, they have no intention of actually talking about anything at all.
Yeah, so we might as well have some fun with it, and some truth can come from some humor. And I always there's always one or two things you say that I haven't your take on things that are I haven't heard any other people say, or I thought of myself, so it's always useful. So on that note, I don't want to uh affirm you too much. Let's get going because the time is ticking. So what we're
Setting
gonna
the bar
do.
high. I'll try to
Yes.
be sharp.
Yeah, so come on, if after an hour and a half I'm like 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 I could have watched Mike Tracy, I'll be a bit and I do follow him, as not like he's not worthwhile. He is. I don't dislike Mike Tracy. I mean, he's fine. Okay, so here we go. Let's go on the stage. So first of all, what are your feelings about this?
I have chosen to take it as an intellectual compliment. I am not taking it as a sexual insult. I had the option to go that way. I decided not to.
See, people, and I did not mean it that way. So for those who are listening to this but not watching it, I picked Varys to as Benjamin's, what would we call it, like Game of Thrones avatar, or somewhat I know I guess we can get, what's that psychologist name, Jungian, like you're kind of shadow or something. And so I melded, well, I just used whatever free AI program was on. And so we have Viserys's body and accoutrements with Benjamin's face and they balded out his head. And then maybe you look older for some reason. You look kind of like, I don't know, like you have a gas pain, but that's fine. That's nothing to do with you.
I
That's just
probably would look older with no hair.
That's true. That's true. That's true. But I thought it was so, yes, and I didn't mean it, and I had forgotten actually when I was trying to figure out, like, okay, who is Benjamin going to be in this scenario? Who am I going to liken him to? And of course, since you're giving political commentary and you are a political theorist, it's only a stone's throw to political strategist, and some political strategists, like, who's that guy? Those Lincoln Project dudes. They go where the money is, yeah, or they go with the flow. So Steve Schmidt. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. But yes, quite indeed. I had forgotten at the time that he was a eunuch, but of course we know that Game of Thrones eunuchs were, pretty badass. But no, I'm glad you took it that way. Let's see. I realized that the face melds program really made me look quite lovely and young, so thank them for that. I didn't put in a young photo of myself. It was fairly recent. So anyway, I picked the white worm because we're mixing and matching here. So it's the whole Game of Thrones or George R. Martin canon. So we can also I decided I can also mix from characters from House of Dragon. So I chose for my avatar to be the white worm. So I'm Tara the White Worm. But we're here, or I'm here to get Benjamin's takes on things. Of course, I have a big mouth, and I'll chime in, but we mainly want to hear what Benjamin Varys Studebaker has to say. Let's see. So yeah, I don't know. I guess okay. So what we're gonna do? I just have some slides. Some of them are memes. Some of them are meldings I've made of characters and Game of Thrones characters. Some of them are headlines. I'm just gonna throw them up there on the screen. Benjamin will say whatever he wants to say. I might say something in response, and then we just move on. And fun, hilarity shall ensue.
And much of this I will not have seen, and
That's
will
right.
take me totally by surprise.
So Barack Littlefinger Obama.
Yeah, the Obama behind the scenes people had a hard time, I think, with the Harris pick, because Obama did not immediately endorse her and was more or less backed into it by Biden immediately giving the endorsement. It seems like, and we only have what's publicly available, but it seems like based on what we have, that was not how he wanted it to go.
All right.
But he did not get his way.
Well, also in the end, Littlefinger did not get his way. So
that is true.
Let's hope that the Obamas don't come to the same literal sticky end. But I don't even think Obama would be as devious as or I don't even know what the word would be, as the actual Littlefinger in the books.
Yeah, the story that's going around the web is that he told Biden that Harris was prepared to invoke the 25th Amendment if Biden did not agree to stand down.
And they should do that anyway.
If they really think he's incompetent, then of course they should invoke it, because there's another 6 months of the presidency here. But things apparently they don't really think he's incompetent because they didn't invoke it.
Yeah. Or it's convenient to have him there, and other people are, other, like what was it you called the Regency, the Biden Regency.
It doesn't matter if he's competent, because the people around him will continue to run things more or less the way they've been running things.
Yeah.
That Biden brain trust, it's the same group of people. Nothing's changed there.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of, it goes with the Game of Thrones thing, but also just historically, when there's been a young king or queen, they're not really calling the shots. They're being kind of manipulated and groomed in all kinds of ways. So I guess the same could be for an old man.
Presidential candidates are increasingly front men for groups of administrators.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so J.D. Gendry Vance. And Gendry was a Robert Baratheon bastard, as I recall. So Robert Baratheon, even though his legal kids were all not his kids, they were Cersei's kids with what's the guy's name? Anyway, her brother. Can't remember his name now. Is it Jeremy? No, not Jeremy.
Jamie.
Thank you. Yeah. But he had lots of other kids. And this one was Gendry was one of the bastards that, as I recall, had a bit of him and Arya, had met up, and they also had a bit of a tryst right before the big battle with the dead people, or the White Walkers. Anyway, feel free to comment on my choice of Game of Thrones person, or anything that comes up with J.D. Gendry Vance.
He's been having a tough week, hasn't he? That poor guy. He's really not cut out for this. He's really struggling. The whole thing about the childless cat ladies. Oof.
Yeah.
He's really just starting cultural conflicts that he is not
Mhm.
prepared to finish.
Was that a new clip or was that an old clip that somebody dug up? I can't remember. I did pick up on the brouhaha, but I didn't know if it was something he said like lately or if it was something he said a while back.
Yeah, that missed me. That's a fact I've been
Yeah.
wanting to get from somebody for a
Mhm.
while, whether it was actually something he said this past couple of weeks or whether it's
Mhm.
older than that. But
Mhm.
there are a number of other things he's said over the course of the
Mhm.
last couple of weeks that have caused trouble,
Mhm.
like this comment that he made. I think it was in the last couple of weeks, but maybe it was earlier. Maybe all of these are much older.
Mhm.
But a comment about his wife. She's not white, but I love her. She's a good mom.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah, that's hard to yeah. I didn't hear that one.
Yeah,
But yeah.
that's a tough one.
That's yeah, because also because what I thought that would be tough because when I first again he's no we don't know if he has the Trump whatever you want to call it because I was thinking when people were going crazy about this cat lady thing I thought Trump said when you're rich you can grab him by the pussy and it didn't matter a bit. People thought, people come saying like, "Okay, that's it." You can't get rid of it. Or when he said he didn't like losers when he was talking about Joe McCain being captured in the during the Vietnam War. All these things, just like didn't matter. Now, I don't know if
Because
JD
Trump has
Vance
no
has that lucky
shame.
charm. Go ahead.
Trump has no shame, and everybody knows that he has no shame. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't shame him because he's totally shameless.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Vance, Vance is someone who very clearly has a pride to him, and he has a sense of self that he asserts by claiming all the time that he's better than other vast groups of people, like people who grew up in Appalachia who didn't work as hard as him, or people who have not succeeded in having children or raising a family. He always has this need to create a distance between himself and others. He's very status oriented, and that
Mm-hmm.
makes him easy to shame. People who constantly try to say that they have something over other people are very easy to make fun of.
Yeah, but I realized that Trump doesn't have any shame. But it was also people thought, well, that would be the end of his campaign. That there'd be a line like quote unquote. Well, people like, well, the evangelicals can't handle this, or the family values voters, and apparently they could, or even or they might say that they have an issue with it, but still people tended to vote for him who were going to vote for him. And it could have just been a thing like, well, yeah, he's not our favorite, but we think he'll put justices on the Supreme Court that we like. We think he might do something about abortion or whatever. So fine, he's not our favorite dude, but whatever. That's what I
Trump
meant,
doesn't
not so much.
code switch.
Yeah.
These other politicians, they code switch, they talk differently depending on who's in the room. They're constantly
Mm-hmm.
trying to look good.
Mm-hmm.
Trump doesn't code switch. Trump just uh, vomits up whatever is on his mind, or at least he gives the appearance of doing that.
That's why
And
people find him authentic. Yeah.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that Vance, in writing that memoir, you would think he would have something like that quality to him, but he doesn't really have that. In
Mm-hmm.
public, he often seems a little bit defensive, a little
Mm,
bit uh, grumpy, looking
mhm,
to protect himself, not trusting the environment. Trump in that environment will just make jokes. And he
mhm,
won't care if the person interviewing him doesn't think it's funny or thinks it's inappropriate.
mhm,
He won't be at all bothered by that. He'll
mhm.
just roll on ahead.
Okay. We have a couple of comments here. I think it was about Biden and the 25th Amendment. So Putin's
Mm.
shirt says, "Who is making the decisions?" I'm assuming that's in terms of like uh executive, like whatever people imagine would have to have Biden sign off on or not. Who's saying, "Hey, dude, sign off on this," or "Sir." I'm sure they don't say "dude," but
There's a group of staffers. Politico and The Hill have occasionally reported on some of these people and mentioned them by name. But there's a kind of group of staffers, advisors, strategists who have been with Biden for a long time, many dating back to his time as VP.
mhm,
And these people know the president very well. were in the meetings and discussions where he concocted with them his plans and strategies over the course of his career, their views and his views are not dissimilar. They are more or less mutually constitutive of one another. So when we talk about Biden, what we've always been talking about is Biden and this group of friends that he has that he's brought with him. And part of the reluctance to leave is that he knows that no other Democratic president will keep the gang together. All of the friends will lose their jobs when he leaves. And he thinks the friends have done really good work. So anytime Biden would get asked, can you still do this? He'd go, I think we're doing really good work. His point is that the friends, the clique around him that he's constructed over the course of his life, he trusts that group of people. But the Biden campaign never just came out and said, I have these really great friends that have been helping me when I'm tired or I need help. He was not willing to say something like that. He couldn't be vulnerable in public in that kind of way. He needed to do something like the Checkers speech, when Richard Nixon was accused of accepting bribes. And he said, he was talking about this dog that was gifted to his family. They gave me a little dog named Checkers, and regardless of what anybody says about it, I'm going to keep it. Right? And that speech put the whole thing to bed. Biden needed to do something like that, but he didn't have the willingness to just come out and say, hey, I have this team. They're great. Let me tell you a little bit about each one of them. I don't let them talk on camera because they're not very well spoken.
But they're my group of rivals or something. Or
these are my group of friends that I trust. And look, this guy's been with me since the Obama administration. This guy was with me when I ran for Senate. It's maybe half a dozen people, and they change a little bit over the years. Sometimes somebody new would get added. A few of them haven't been there as long as the rest. But in terms of all the names, Politico and The Hill, if you look at, Biden Brain Trust, Politico, Biden Brain Trust, The Hill, you Google that, the list of the key names will come up from those publications that have actually taken some interest in reporting on how decisions are taken and conversations happen in the Biden administration. I think something a lot of people don't realize is that Harris was rarely in those meetings. In the key meetings with those people, Harris tended to not be present or to not be in a major speaking role. So there's long been an antagonism between the Harris team and the Biden Brain Trust.
Okay. All right. So let's see. There's another comment, I think, or question. Putin's shirt. Choosing Vance as VP was an electoral mistake. Normally, a candidate for POTUS chooses a VP in a state where they aren't strong, not Ohio, where Trump is already strong. Thoughts?
Yeah, there are kind of two main theories of how to pick the VP. One is electoral purposes in the upcoming election. You try to flip a state that you think you might not win without the VP, or maybe you try to shore up support with a particular constituency, often within the party that doesn't think very much of you. So in the case of Pence, it wasn't about trying to win Indiana, which Trump anticipated he would likely win in any case. It was about trying to shore up support with Christians, trying to show Christian voters on the religious right that he was their guy. So sometimes it can be about a demographic or a particular segment within the party rather than a state. But also sometimes it can be about trying to make inroads into a new group or a new constituency that you haven't previously been able to get a lot of attention from or respect from. Maybe the party has historically maligned them or not paid attention to them. So I think some people thought that Vance would do that for working class people. That was the thinking behind picking Vance. I don't think that that will actually work, because I think if people actually look at the content of Hillbilly Elegy, Vance in that book is very disparaging toward people that he feels don't work as hard as him and don't have the merit that he has. Now, some people will say that Vance has grown up and matured since writing Hillbilly Elegy, but he wrote Hillbilly Elegy when he was 31, which is pretty close to me in age. So I'm not very much impressed by that argument.
Yeah, no, and I haven't read the book or watched was it a movie or a miniseries that was based?
There's a movie on Netflix.
Okay, yeah, I haven't watched either. So I'm one of those people, and of course we know that doesn't mean you can't have a comment on it. So I'm basing my comments on other people's comments. It just sounds like it was kind of contrived, like to prop him up as some sort of, Horatio Alger from Appalachia, like slumdog venture capitalist or something. Like, despite my roots, I've, kind of, I've that's how I saw it. Just not and just kind of use all these people and and the issues and the structural, deindustrialization, all that stuff is just kind of a backdrop to showcase how fantastic he is. I
The
mean,
Mitt
but again, I
Romney
didn't read it.
people and the kind of centrist Democrats, they really liked it. The liberal press reviewed it very favorably at the time. And they liked it because it said it's not just the economy, it's also culture. And it made these essentializing arguments about ethnic groups. It said that Appalachians are Scots-Irish, and therefore they have certain cultural tendencies or features that make them different from white people in other parts of the country.
Oh, back to
It
the
was
1800s.
well, this kind of like Albion seed type stuff is very popular with the American elite in both parties, which loves to
Okay.
racialize and speak all the time in terms of ethnicity. Even when talking about the white population, it loves to try to break the white population down into ethnic groups, cultural groups,
Oh, yeah.
based on where in the UK the group originated from or where in Europe the group originated from. They love these kinds of narratives because it gets the conversation away from the economy and away from class. And when Hillbilly Elegy came out, they were really, really aggressively looking for an explanation for the Trump phenomenon that was cultural rather than class-based. They always were seeking to put class and culture in opposition to each other. So they could say it's culture, not class. And the way that book starts, it starts with Vance going, it's not all about deindustrialization. It's also about a Scots-Irish revenge, bitterness thing.
Oh, no, I might have to read it.
So there's all these disparaging
I didn't know it was a
insults to the
comedy.
Appalachians. He is extremely rude about the people he grew up in close proximity to. And it's very clear that he doesn't like his mother, that he has a bitterness and a resentment toward his family, many members of his family, because he grew up in a very difficult situation. And he had the attitude that many Republicans have, that if I made it, what the hell is wrong with the rest of you?
I wonder what they think of my pedigree, because I grew up very working class. But my mother's maiden name, wait for it, is Wallace. Aha! So my Scottish friends, I'm like, I should find out where the old parent with my mom's side of the family came from, or well, at least her dad's name, whatever, Wallace. Anyway, and on my dad's side, it's a lot of my dad's parents and grandparents were quote unquote Danish. So his grandparents came over from Denmark, but then they married, both that, so Danish and Scotch, I guess.
Yeah. Do you explain yourself in terms of these things? Do you run
God
around
no,
going,
God no. I
I'm
always find
this
it
way
so
because I'm Scottish. I'm
Oh
this
God,
way
no.
because I'm
I always
Danish?
find it very weird. And growing up in the States, we know this. Yeah, I mean, I have some family members who love like there's the Danish festival and Cottage Grove and Junction City, Oregon, and it's fine if it's just like a weekend and you have some food and people get dressed up and whatnot. But it's so hilarious to me. It's like, what about me exactly is Danish? What about me exactly is Scottish? I mean, nothing. I mean, I think it's kind of cool just historically to kind of see, like, go back in time and see where
And
your
what's
family
even the
came from.
content of
But
that? Like, you go to Scotland or you
it's a
go to
blood thing.
Denmark. There's all kinds of different people in Denmark. There's all kinds of different people in Scotland. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah. But people, I mean,
it's just
again,
a kind of ethnic pseudoscience that people engage in.
Oh, no. And I could see if it's just for fun, but when it starts getting into this kind of thing, people want to have are explaining social and political phenomena through where people's great grandparents came from.
Especially when they're saying that they want to use this as an alternative, more powerful explanation to class.
Yeah, that's
economic change.
Yeah.
To deindustrialization. This is just, it's awful racist shit. But the entire American elite is full of awful racist shit, both the Democrats and the Republicans. And the thing that really stuck out to me over the last 2 weeks is how racist both sides are, and how much race baiting is going to be the thing in this election because there's no policy.
Yeah, or we might call it racialist or the anti-racist racists or who knows what. Okay, so let's see. Somebody else had a comment? I'm just going to see if it's about what we're talking about. Well, one thing, and then we'll move on to the next character. We can't stay on Biden all day. I think it's Stinkin' Blinken making the foreign policy decisions. So, what do you think that? Yeah, that does Blinken? Do you think that that Blinken just feels empowered to call the shots, or does he still have obviously people he needs to
Well, Blinken is,
consult?
is a player because he's the Secretary of State, so he'll
Mm,
be in on foreign policy meetings, but he's not one of the old core Biden guys from way back when. Those guys often have less formal roles. They're sometimes strategists or staffers. They aren't necessarily in cabinet positions. And this is
mm,
something else that I think is hard for people to follow. It used to be that when we were talking about who are the players in an administration, they would
mm,
typically be people appointed to the cabinet in roles that require Senate confirmation. So if we talked
mm,
about the Bush administration, we would say Dick Cheney, the VP, we'd say Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of State, we'd say
mm,
Condoleezza Rice, Homeland Security, and then Secretary of State.
mm,
We had Colin Powell, who was Secretary of State, but then clearly marginalized while still in that
mm,
role. These were
mm,
all very official positions. Now, a lot of the people who are players are strategists and people who are focused on speech writing, language, presentation, aesthetics. A lot of these people are more important to the day-to-day functioning of the administration now
mm,
than the formal people who are in the formal jobs.
mm.
And Hunter, members of the family coming into the meetings with the president. This is something
God,
that blew
Hunter
people's
Biden,
minds. After
Jesus.
the debate, Hunter started coming to stuff with him so that the family would have eyes in the meetings and be able
Oh,
to see
okay,
how
that makes
people were
sense.
were treating
Mm,
him, and
mm,
so that they could look out for him if somebody was trying to pressure him to do
mm.
something that they didn't think he should do. Jill sent Hunter in there as the eyes and ears.
There you go, Jill.
That's a
Yeah,
guess by me. I don't know for a fact that
well,
Jill
we know, of
actually did
course,
that.
obviously, this is just based on what Benjamin has seen and heard, and the Sisyphus of however old he is following these things. Obviously, if anyone thinks we're actually in the room, you know, or that we have that kind of
Well, sometimes
heat at
I've read
the
real
security
credible
state.
reports. Other times I'm making suppositions, and I try to
Yeah,
distinguish whether it's based on a credible report or
yeah.
it's me making a supposition that draws a connection among other things I've actually read.
Okay, so uh, here we go. Donald Baratheon Trump. And I just wanted just the last since we last talked, what was it, couple weeks, 2 weeks. Uh, what do you want to say by at least this, and or if it's a completely crazy comparison, I have to find somebody else. I just like the picture, and anything you want to say about what's going on and with
The,
DJT.
the loudness of him, I think it is an appropriate comparison. I mean,
Mm,
for one, he has been president, so he has been in the chief spot,
mm,
and he is this very loud, bawdy kind of person.
mm,
That does kind of fit him. I
yeah,
think that immediately after he picked Vance, he was getting drowned by Vance. All of the chatter around the campaign was
yeah.
Vance, Vance, Vance. It was a very bad
Mm,
week for him in the polling. And now he's trying to get himself back at the center of things. He said that he thinks that the VP shouldn't make any difference to the actual result, that historically the VP hasn't mattered at all for the result. And therefore, Vance shouldn't matter, isn't
mm,
important, which is a little funny because it kind of slags Vance off. But what I think he's trying to do now is get the campaign back focused on him and off
mm,
of Vance. So
mm,
one way of doing that is to go to that African American journalists meeting, that Black journalist meeting that he took, and be interviewed by those journalists. And there's a fierce debate online about what was the upshot of that. Did he
mm,
bomb that? Uh,
mm,
were people laughing at him or with him?
mm,
Depending on your politics, people are interpreting that event in very different ways.
mm,
That's the event where he went after Harris and said that she turned into a Black person. She
mm,
had been Indian and then turned
mm,
into
mm.
that got a lot of attention, and some
Yeah.
of the attention off of Vance,
Mm,
which I think for
mm,
him, getting attention off of Vance, even if it's negative attention,
mm,
is a positive move for him in the
mm.
near term. The other thing he just announced he's going to do that will get attention back on him is debate Kamala Harris on, I believe, September 4th.
Oh, that'll
He's
be
going to do it
fun.
on Fox. It's going to
Okay.
be in an arena with a full audience.
Oh,
So I
that's his
presume an
domain.
indoor arena.
That's his domain. For
And
sure.
she
I don't know if it's
agreed to
hers.
that.
Well, she's an idiot.
Brett Baer is the
Sorry.
moderator.
I mean, obviously, she's not a total idiot because she's accomplished quite, she's VP and she was attorney general. And before that, variety of things. Senator. And then before that, attorney general. So obviously, she's not unaccomplished. But yeah.
His justification for sacking the previous interview was that because Biden had backed out of it, it was no longer the interview that he had agreed. It was no longer the debate that he had agreed to. And also, he was mad at ABC and mad at Stephanopoulos in particular, in part because Stephanopoulos tried to help Biden or interact with Biden following the debate. So he's suing ABC.
Oh, is he suing ABC?
Yes. And
awesome.
he said to create a conflict of interest. So he's implicitly admitting he deliberately sued ABC so that no one could argue that he should have to debate on ABC. He did it to create a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So that Harris would have to say he doesn't have to do ABC. And then that enabled him to move it over to Fox.
Okay. Let's see. So here is the picture, interesting picture, and I didn't put that on. I think it was one of the Revolutionary Blackout Network guys posted this, saying, "Yeah, your typical black family." and this is from Black Revolutionary Network, guys. So this wasn't. So again, not that people who are black or Indian can get away with saying anything they want. I mean, obviously, there's diversity in all these groups. But I was also thinking about the Caleb Maupin book that I haven't read, but he wrote about a book on Kamala Harris. I think that's been like banned from Amazon now. And he goes through and says that, so she also has a father. Her father's African American, her mother's Indian. I think was born in India, I think. And then I don't know, but anyway, Indian, and then later became an American citizen. I think that's it. But Kamala, was born in the States. So her dad is African American or black, and her mom is Indian. You can see, I think she's with her grandparents here. Maybe her mom and her, I don't know who that guy is, an uncle. Anyway,
he's Jamaican.
Her dad's Jamaican.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, in this picture, this picture is the Indian side. So it's like, I'm guessing this is her mom and maybe her mom's brother or something. And then her sister, and then maybe, I guess her sister's kids, maybe. I'm not sure. That would be my guess. But they're in saris. Obviously, but the thing is what I would say in Trump's defense, or kind of defense, when he went after Elizabeth Warren for saying that she was Native American, it worked because it turned out that she doesn't even have any DNA. Maybe she's like 0.001% or something like that. And I'm not mixed race, but from people that I know of who are, and we never had these actual conversations, which side you lean into is very context dependent. Yeah. So if you're hanging out with your Indian grandparent side of the family, it's not surprising that maybe that comes out more, unless you're trying to be rebellious and vice versa. So to me, this idea that she's just became black, I think maybe again, if he's being less artful, is that she's leaning into that side as if she's not Indian as well. Yeah. So now she's a black woman. She's a black woman running for president. The Indian stuff is pushed back. I mean, in terms of a
lot of people are pretending not to have understood it. It's a critique of code switching. Harris is a code switcher. Harris code switches all the time about lots of things. Harris uses a different voice when she's talking to a black audience or a Southern audience than when she's talking to a Northern white audience. She puts on an accent like Hillary Clinton used to do. Right? That's code switching, presenting yourself differently depending on who you're around. And his argument is that she's not authentic because she's not consistently the same way in how she presents herself, regardless of who's in the room.
Yeah.
Right? Back in 2019, we left-wingers were viciously criticizing her for saying different things about Medicare for All depending on which room she was in. In some rooms, in front of left-wing audiences, she would say that she's for Medicare for All. In other rooms, she would say she's for something like a public option. It was not at all clear what her position was, and she changed it all the time, continuously. Code switching. saying
Yeah.
different things to different rooms. That's long been the principal weakness of Harris. If he had
Mhm.
made the argument in terms of policy in a more substantive
Mhm.
way, I
Mhm.
think it would have been less outrageous, but it also would have
Mhm.
drawn less attention. So his
Yeah.
focus is on trying to get people to
Yeah.
talk about her. And that's something else that his campaign needs to do. They
Mhm.
need to get people talking about Harris. The
Mhm.
Democrats don't actually want to talk about Harris because Harris, we know from 2019,
Mhm.
is not someone who is very good at weathering very large amounts of media attention because she says contradictory things
Mhm.
depending on who's around her.
Mhm.
So instead of having Harris talk,
Mhm.
they will post TikTok videos where you
Mhm.
see Harris dancing and grooving and not
Mhm.
saying very much while rap music plays in the
Yeah.
background. They want an
Megan the
aesthetic,
Stallion.
make her look cool, make her
Yeah.
seem cool. But it's
Mhm.
not about policy. It's not about making statements
Mhm.
about issues because Harris isn't able to do that.
Mhm.
But
Well, and
making
what
it about race, he allows
yeah.
them to make all of these jokes
Yeah.
about him and claim that he's a
And
racist.
thank you for bringing that up, code switching. I think but it's also appearance, yeah. So I know a lot of it's like she I don't know at what point she yeah, again I don't know, I haven't followed her long. But it's not like she's wearing saris and whatnot. And she could wear a sari. Saris are fantastic, by the way. I wear them all the time in India. I don't wear them outside of India because I'd feel like I was putting on a costume. But in India, fantastic. Although they had to help me because even when I thought I put it on pretty good, as soon as a woman saw me who had any kind of relationship to me, they'd immediately bring me into a room and like
Help you out.
undo it and redo it. I'm like, okay. So yeah, I mean, and she has the bead, and of course, I'm not disparaging this picture at all. I mean, her mom is Indian, so it's not surprising that this is part of her life. But again, I'm not surprised people jumped on that with Trump, but I was also like, he has a point. All of a sudden now she's Beyonce, and Megan the Stallion or something. I'm wondering.
Yeah.
I'm really actually wondering if they're going to have her shake that ass at the DNC. I mean,
There well, there is a lot of in the promotional material. There is a
it
lot
probably
of
would work for
twerking.
her.
There is a lot of twerking in the official promotional material put out by the
Yeah.
campaign. But there
Yeah.
is a race baiting aspect to this too, because one
Mhm.
of the issues in the United States is the attempt to be colorist about race and to say that light skinned or mixed
Mhm.
race African Americans are less black than
Mhm.
darker looking
Mhm.
African Americans. There are some people in the country who subscribe to colorism, and there is
Mhm.
definitely an attempt to remind those people of Harris's background for the
Mhm.
purposes of making them
Mhm.
less interested in her. So there is
Mhm.
a race baiting aspect to the way he chose to frame it.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I think there's also this wider point about code switching that people are
Mhm.
pretending not to have understood, when, of course, I
Mhm.
think most people who have eyes to see and ears to hear know very
Mhm.
well that there is a code switching issue with
Mhm.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah. All right. So let's see quite quickly, and the race thing will come back up. Don't worry. This might be we've kind of already covered this, but just in case you have anything to say, Joe Viserius Biden,
That poor guy.
and this is from House of Dragon. And yeah, I have more sympathy for Viserius than I do for Biden, but I thought it was, who else could I
I'd
have
love to
paired him up
just
with?
sit next to him for 45 minutes and let him complain to me in whatever way he'd like to about whatever's happened to him. You know how a lot of older people with dementia,
Yeah.
they get into these interesting loops where they
Hmm.
complain about stuff and
Hmm.
they say, so and so did this to me. How could they do this? I would
Hmm.
sit and listen to that for 45 minutes just to hear all of what
What's
he's
going
been
on? Yeah.
feeling, because
Yeah.
he hasn't been able put in front of a camera or given any real opportunity to talk about any of it. And if
Hmm.
he does go in front of a camera, he'll read a speech. It will be
Hmm.
very difficult for us to actually hear how he feels about it, because
Hmm.
it's not at all useful to the
Hmm.
campaign for that to be discussed publicly at this time.
No. No. All right. Let's see. Next thing I have here. Oh, well, we've been calling about Queen Kamala first of her name. Uh, I don't know if I don't do her with Circe, who I don't know who I could pair her up with, but there was that lady from across the sea with the daughters. No, she was too cool. Anyway, um, we've been talking about that. I don't know.
I would do Hillary as Daenerys personally because of all the
Oh,
bombing,
okay. Oh
burning
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
and destroying.
She'll unleash the dragons. That's for sure. Good idea. I might next time I might do put Hillary with her because right now
Yeah,
I have them both. I have them both with
that would allow you to
with
differentiate.
Cersei.
Hillary is we came, we saw, he died. So
Yeah. So I have Hillary Bad Penny Clinton bitch because she's still I think that she would be happy to come in and clean up and have a Hail Mary attempt if if the Kamala's fantastic, hey queen, aren't you cool? Don't you want to vote for Kamala? Campaign goes sideways. I'm sure she would be happy to get the band back together for a last minute thing. But I don't think she's ever going to end up being president, unfortunately, or for her.
yeah, I don't see that happening from here. At this point, I
Mhm,
think the major factor in unifying around Harris is the question about the campaign money, because
mhm,
there's so much money that was donated to Biden Harris. And because it was donated to Harris as she was the VP on the ticket, there's an easy legal argument for why Harris should get that money. But if a third person were to be nominated, a legal argument could be made by Trump that that money can't be transferred to that person because the people who donated that money did not know
mhm,
that they were giving that
mhm,
money to that person. And the
mhm,
Democrats can't just say that because they were donating to the Democratic Party presidential ticket, it
mhm,
automatically goes to whoever is on that ticket. So I
mhm.
think the financial reasons were a big part of why there was convalescing around Harris. That and the fact that it was so late in the game. What do you want? Open
Okay.
convention, 68? We talked about that.
Yeah, yeah. And I put that out. There's a clip when Benjamin's talking about why people should be careful what they wish for when they're wanting an open convention that you can find on on the YouTube channel. I haven't put it on the Rumble yet, but also on the Twitter feed. Let's see. So this is from 4:55. So only like 10 minutes ago, what we were talking about. Putin's shirt 10 minutes ago wrote this comment. There's only so much wealth in the world. Not everybody can make it. Maybe he was talking about the hillbilly elegy. The
Mm.
ones who do fit a certain profile of cutthroat vulture capitalism, crushing the hands on the rungs below as they climb up.
Well, yeah, I think that a lot of rich people have a strong incentive to portray themselves as regular people, but there's a reason that they became rich and regular people do not.
Mm.
And if you don't know what that reason is, you haven't looked at them long enough or hard enough. Rich people are not regular people. They
Mm.
don't make the decisions that regular people make. That's why they end up rich.
All right. So now some more race stuff. I'll ask you this question, Benjamin. Would you vote for Kamala Harris, the president of the United States? Yes, slay queen. No, I'm racist. No, I'm sexist. No, some other reason.
I am not planning to vote for any of the candidates that currently get any attention. I'm not planning to vote for Harris or Trump or Stein or the Libertarian nominee, whoever that is, or
Mhm,
RFK. I'm not currently planning to vote for any of those people. I will either not vote or I'll
mhm,
write somebody in.
mhm. Okay, but in terms of Kamala Harris, is that because you're racist or because you're sexist or because you're both racist and sexist?
No,
I mean,
other
that's.
reasons.
I mean, these aren't my rules, Benjamin. You know, this is how they're playing it.
Yes, of course. But I just go, well, if they had nominated Dan Quayle, if the Republican nominee were Dan Quayle, and you said he was a stupid moron, and they respond with, "What do you hate Hoosiers? Do you hate Christians?" I don't think anybody would be moved by that. But the principal reason to not vote for Harris, apart from disagreeing with neoliberalism and with her total lack of consistency or coherency on any issue, is that she is a very stupid person who
Mm,
is not smart enough to do that job. And that has
mhm,
nothing to do with sex. It has nothing to do with race. There are
mhm.
lots and lots of competent people of all sorts of backgrounds. She is not one of them.
Mm. All right, now prepare yourself for this. Prepare yourself for this. Would you wear this hat?
Oh,
Even
no,
as it like ironically.
nor would I wear a Black Americans for Trump hat. Both of these things are the worst
White
kind
dudes
of
for
race
Harris.
baiting.
Yeah.
Inviting people to organize, to identify with a race and organize on the basis of race is so retrograde and so awful. The fact that this is normal for both major party candidates to do this in this day and age, and people think it's perfectly fine to organize on the basis of their race or on the basis of their sex, it's just despicable. Just despicable.
Now, if we can handle it, I do have a clip from White Women for Harris and White Dudes for Harris. I have a clip.
Okay.
But first, let's get through this part. Okay. Oops, sorry. That's sorry. I must have, in my rush to get a PDF, I must oh yeah. Oh, here. Yeah. I'll do more of the clips. I'll do the clips first, or the news clips, and then I'll do the little 5-minute I think it's someone in Australia that was ragging on it. Okay. So dystopian white women for Kamala. White women for Kamala, TikToker discussed how to deal with bigoted family members and Trump voters. And someone likened it to watching, like, they thought they were watching a Black Mirror episode. With this woman called Miss Frazzle. I don't know if she actually is an elementary school teacher, but this is her thing, and she was trying to help women know how to, best way to help get the first Black woman elected president. Let's see, and this hurt. The dude is being very undude. Celebrity-studded white dudes for Harris call raises $4 million for vice president. Jeff Bridges, Mark Hamill, Mike Ruffalo, and contenders for Harris's VP. Oh, yeah, that's right. It was them. It was celebrities, a whole bunch of white celebrities, and contenders for Harris's VP pick are also all dudes. I think they might be all white dudes. Pick up among 190,000 participants in a Zoom call. Yeah, so I think this was basically, I think the idea was that I'm sure that if you wanted to participate in the Zoom call, you had to pay varying amounts. But yes, I don't know if you have anything to say about this before we watch a clip.
I just think the whole thing is despicable. Imagine in the 90s telling people you were joining a white dudes for some candidate organization. What people would have said to you, how people would have looked at you if you said such a thing 30 years ago. We have, in so many ways, become so much worse as people. Our ability to think, our ability to engage constructively with the problems that we face has deteriorated enormously over the course of my lifetime. It's incredible how much stupider everything is than it used to be.
I know. And in a way, it makes you feel smart, but sad. I don't know how to feel about it. I used to literally think that most people weren't. I used to think that most people weren't stupid, because I could be like, because you don't know what you don't know, yeah, or you have some idea about the things you don't know, but now I'm like, I think there's people who, and especially, it's one thing if you don't have the access to the information or whatever. But when there's no excuse and people are I'm just like, I don't even think, even if they're
not
pretending
biologically or genetically inevitable.
Yeah, now I'm like, now I feel like maybe I'm in the top 10%.
Yeah,
all the good it does me.
As we marketize everything, we make everything stupider. Everything is optimized for clicks. Everything is optimized for subs. Everything is becoming stupider across time because of neoliberal marketization. So it's a social phenomenon. When you have a country where it's just taken for granted that people aren't going to be able to raise their own kids because both parents are going to have to work, and they're both going to have to work full time, and the kids are going to be raised by mercenaries who have been hired. And people have convinced themselves that being taken care of by someone who's paid to take care of you is just as good as being taken care of by somebody who loves you. Does it surprise us that we are producing a generation of unloved children who feel unloved, who are mentally unwell, who are educationally behind, who are not able to read complex texts or
to take a no
faucets, for that matter,
or to take a no?
Yeah, you can't market.
My kids know how to take a no. I tell them no all the time.
Yeah, you can't replace love with money. You can't replace love with the market. And
or I just want to say really quick. Sorry, I just want to interrupt you for a second, because we're having another live stream tonight where I'm going to be talking about my article where I critique this child-free movement, and which is part of, there's very much a neoliberal type of, it's very much professional bourgeois, we're not breeders, or whatever it is. on the worst side of it. They don't all talk like that. But then they marry up with the people on the left who the abolish the family crew who think that that the state bureaucracy is the best way to raise raise kids. It's just kind of like how weird how people on one so we have the abolish the family, which are say they're Marxists and communists, and then you have the child free people want to start talking about like children are a cancer or something.
You know, when I was at Cambridge, I talked to these very affluent,
Crazy.
young people, students who had been raised by nannies in very affluent families, and they had enormous emotional damage from being raised by highly professional, highly competent British Mary Poppins types.
Yeah.
It's extremely, extremely difficult when your parents have no time for you to reach adulthood and be at all okay. Extremely difficult. Even if you are getting a very, very high level of mercenary parenting relative to what most people get.
Yeah.
It's not good for any child. And the fact that we are making the entire economy and the entire society premised on this being the mainstream normal thing. I mean, when I was a kid, yeah, there were some kids who had to go to an after school club because their parents weren't around to pick them up or be there at home. The parents of the kids who didn't go to those clubs would tell you, don't hang out with those kids because those kids will have problems. Those kids, you can't trust them. There was a sense that those kids were not getting the things that they needed.
Yeah.
And while there was classism in terms of the social exclusion of them, there was also an element of truth to what our parents were saying, which is that those kids were being raised in inferior circumstances that were not going to be as good for their well-being or development. And
well, and
we
you're
just have
bad
a
if you
whole society that's premised
and you're
on this
bad if
being
you say, but
normal.
now you're bad if you say that. It's like, the studies bear this out. It doesn't mean that someone who's a single parent or a single or doesn't have that or whatever is like bad. But I mean, I grew up my mom stayed at home until I remember it very quickly. I remember being very upset. I think I was 9 or 10. No, I think it was 8 or 9. And she had gotten hired to be a cashier at the new Safeway, which is a union job at that time. And she was excited. She was excited to go. It was going to be a part-time job. And I remember being in the back of the car thinking, well, I don't want, I don't want this to happen. But I was 8, my brother was 11, and we lived in we didn't live in a rough part of the Pacific Northwest. So we would just, we would be home if it was a couple days during the week when she was working, and then in the weekend, we would just, we would be on our own for maybe a couple of hours or something in the house. But then again, we lived in, our neighbors knew us. There was kids there, so it was a various things. My dad had
Yeah,
a
and you were already
yep.
8 at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah. So, and
This is going on with 3-year-olds,
Oh, no, no, no.
2-year-olds,
Or
4-year-olds.
2-week-olds, 2-week-olds.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm not. So no,
And
I'm just
ubiquitous
saying that,
everywhere
yeah,
in the society. It's
yeah.
incredible. And this is not to blame anybody. People are in situations where they have to work because they have almost no money. And then they're giving up a large percentage of the money oftentimes that the second job brings in. Often more than 50% of the second parent's income is going to the child care so that the
Yeah.
second parent can work. It's ridiculous. And
Well,
it's so
also,
unfair
yeah,
and cruel
yeah.
to people.
Yeah, but it's also we're encouraging. It's not there. I don't dispute the economic side at all, but there's also this idea that somehow being a parent, especially for the women in the kind of the PMC, is somehow less than.
Well, this is the
Yeah,
misogyny and the hatred
this
of
is
any
the thing.
kind
Like
of labor
somehow, if
that's
you're that
feminine
it's
coded.
somehow a retrograde decision to have kids, and people don't know what to do with me because I have 3 kids, but I didn't have my first kid till I was 30. So. So it's kind of, and I was also surprised when my body was like, have a kid out of nowhere. But anyway, that's another show. But
They
go
don't
ahead.
value any kind of work that is traditionally associated with women. Any kind of work that's traditionally associated with women, they don't think should pay. They don't think it should pay well. They don't think it should be done.
Men and women, by the way, in certain classes.
But especially
Unfortunately.
anything that's traditionally associated with
Yeah,
women. This
yeah.
is the misogynistic
No. What I mean is,
aspect.
it's not just the right that does this. Is what I'm saying.
Yes. No, it's very
Yeah.
often people who claim to be feminist don't value work that women have traditionally done. It's not about for them. You would think it would be about making it so that people of either sex can do any role, right? And I think it's perfectly wonderful for men to stay home with children. That's wonderful, and it should happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no problem with whichever sex is at home. Doesn't matter which one.
But it's good if
their
it's the
attitude
parent.
is that no one should be home. And then somebody who is working class should get paid a wage that's so little they can't afford to have children of their own.
Or have to ignore their own kids.
Or have to ignore their own kids, right? To look after the children of the affluent who will be absentee parents. So in this, we're going to have a society where more than 90% of the people have never been parented. I just think it's ridiculous. And it works me up. It's one of the issues that really works me up because everybody's normalizing this. Everybody's acting like
it's too bad that you're not going to be on the panel at 7. Well, my 7. Yeah.
What's going on that panel?
Well, I wrote a thing on an X article. What was it called? Child free. How the child free movement. What did I call it? Like the anti-family, anti-mother, anti-social aspects of the child free movement. And actually, I got inspired. I had been irritated about this before because it's both sides. It's the neoliberal side or the liberal feminist side, but it's also these abolish the family yahoos. Yeah. And so what tipped me off to finally write this paper or write what or to process what I had already been kind of plopping in my document file for this was the uproar about the childish cat ladies, because some of it was people started saying, no, we're child free and we're this and we're that. And I'm like, I would never call anybody childless. Okay. I don't like that term, but anyway, so we're talking about,
and lots of people can't have children. And for various legitimate reasons don't want them. There's nothing wrong with choosing not to have children.
Yeah. But anyway, I bring in the kind of the PMC side of it. I bring in the political economy side of it. And I also bring in the social biological imperative of it, that if you don't have around 2.2 kids, whatever group you are, it could be a tribe, it could be a nation, it could be whatever, is going to start is not going to be able to sustain itself.
Unless it imports, and it also brings in the kind
of, which was another issue, just to be honest with it. And also there's a lot of kind of Malthusian people on the left and right. And so anyway, kind of bringing in all that stuff. So I having an interlocutor come in because I don't want to talk into the camera about my own papers. So anyway, enough about that. Okay, let's see, more race stuff. So you've heard of white dudes for Kamala, now come the deadheads. Fans of one of the most enduring classic rock bands, along with Mandy Patinkin, will rally on Zoom in support of presumptive Democratic candidate Kamala Harris.
And will she actually talk or tell them that she's going to do anything for them? Or
I don't think she'll even be on there. I think it's just for them to feel good about themselves.
At this point, relative to Harris, Trump is the policy wonk candidate. He keeps tweeting out policies. He wants to, make Social Security tax-free for seniors, he says. We haven't heard a single policy. Compared to Harris, Trump might as well be Elizabeth Warren out there, throwing out policy after policy white paper. It's incredible. It's incredible that Harris gets away with having absolutely no substance whatsoever. None.
Okay, now I got to find my bookmark. Oh crap. Did I not? Sorry, because I have that clip and I thought I know I bookmarked it, but now I have to figure out where I bookmarked it on the white dudes for well, I'm not going to waste time here. I can paraphrase it and you can watch it later. It's basically, so you might have seen it. So there's Miss Frazzle, and she's an influencer now, and she basically comes on, and it's all these kind of it's Rapinoe from former Olympic champion Rapinoe, and it's all these kind of celebrity some white women with name recognition, basically. And she gets on and she basically says she's going to tell them about how the best way women can help elect Kamala. And she talks about how, we as white women, we really have a lot to learn and to unlearn. And that whenever you feel like you don't want to talk over a BIPOC person or woman, and you don't want to challenge them, so if you find yourself wanting to do that, you got to put your listening ears on.
Yeah,
And it just
don't actually think about any of the ideas that come out of anybody's mouth. Just look at their body and compare their body to yours. And if their
yeah.
body has certain features that your body doesn't have,
Mm,
shut up and defer to whatever they say, no matter how stupid it
mm,
is.
yeah.
You know,
No,
don't
and it
think
just kind
about
of
things people
yeah.
say. Just defer to bodies. This is necessary because Harris can't say anything. Harris is not capable of giving an account of herself.
Mm-hmm. And it just kind of digresses from there. And all these women are just like, and I'm just so excited to be here with all these women on about this wonderful opportunity to have to finally elect a woman of color. And it's such like, oh, good us. Aren't we fantastic? We're so willing
Just
to
all
use our
vibes.
privilege or to whatever. And it's like, and all of this reifies the idea there's something objectively, there's something objective at the heart of white supremacy. You can't give away or use what you don't have. I mean, so it's. I also thought, and you must. I know we don't want to get too theory, and I wanted to pull up the. You probably saw. You're probably familiar with that clip of Zizek when he's talking about when liberals like want to slag off. The Enlightenment or something like that, and he has that joke about there's like I don't know if it's a rabbi and a priest and some rich guy, and they're all talking about how they're nothing and they're this and that. And some poor person comes in, and's like, yeah, I'm also nothing. They look at him like, who are you to say you're nothing? So this idea that it's a kind that under the guise of being anti-racist or being good allies, they're the ones that somehow aren't raced, or they're the ones that can step in and inside and outside of their whiteness, whereas the other people are totally locked in it,
Of
and
course,
like
it's
children.
incredibly condescending. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations. It's all of that stuff that's been around forever. But astoundingly, these people have managed to reach some point in adulthood, and they've never been familiarized with the problems with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
It is astounding, and yet, you can't blame them. We have a society
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't properly socialize anybody and is constantly pushing racial and ethnic categories as the
Mm-hmm.
ontology through which we are meant to understand the social.
Mm-hmm. And then with this one, it starts off with Mark Hamill, the Sith who's gone Sith. Nothing says Jedi like simping for the Empire, but that's another, not that, of course. Obviously, Mark Hamill is not Luke Skywalker, but that's the one. That's the role he's most familiar with. Mark Ruffalo and Jeff Bridges, and I'll do my Jeff Bridges. He's like, "How crazy is this, man? How exciting is it for us guys to be able to get together with the possibility of electing the first female president? So cool, man! It's so cool." And I can't remember the guy's name. He was in oh crap, he did the snowman. He does the snowman's voice in Frozen, and also he was the sidekick in Sleeping in Beauty and the Beast. I don't know. Anyway, he's some anyway,
Yes,
but
he's
he's
done
on.
lots of things.
Yeah, he's on there, and he was basically saying how this is like that they really need to step up. White guys really need to step up because they really let their, especially fathers who have daughters, we've really let our daughters down. We can't let Trump win again. And he says this story, and I don't know if it's true or not. He's like, I remember in 2016 when it became clear that Trump was going to win, I went into my daughter's room and I wept over them sleeping. I'm like, okay. But it's just this amazing circle jerk of virtue signaling. It's just,
Because they
but
understand
he raised lots
everything
of money though.
exclusively in terms of ethnicity and race and sex.
Mm-hmm.
That's all there is to these people. There isn't
Mm-hmm.
class. There isn't capitalism. Isn't a thing. Policy isn't a thing. None of this. We don't talk about any of it anymore. It's just bodies and what features do bodies have or do they not have?
Yeah. So on that, then we have that I missed this until you brought it to my attention. So JD Vance told his son to shut the hell up about Pokemon while talking to Trump. And this says Pokey problem. Apparently, this is bad. He's a very bad man because he told his kid to shut up. I tell my kids to shut up all the time. I try not to use the word shut up, mind you. Like be quiet, shush, or what are you talking about? Or please, or that's enough, pipe down. But every once in a while, yeah. when you've had enough.
So, of course, because he criticized childless cat ladies, now the question is, well, are you really happy having had children? And are you really a good parent? Now it gets thrown back in this direction. And what it's all been made so stupid, right? Now it's about people who have kids versus people who don't, and who's morally better, instead of why do we have a society that's not capable of reproducing itself in a way that produces the kinds of qualities, skills, virtues, capabilities that we expect of democratic citizens? Why are we not capable of exhibiting these qualities anymore? What has structurally changed that has made it impossible for people to get these qualities? Instead of having a complex conversation about what does somebody need to be a citizen, what does somebody need to be a critical reader, critical appreciator of whatever's in front of them, it just becomes who's better. Bodies that have little bodies with them or bodies that don't. But the rest of this story is kind of funny. So he tells his kid, shut the hell up about Pikachu. This is the most important phone call of my life. And then Trump, who's on the phone, because this is when Trump was telling him he was going to be the VP. Trump says, who's there? He says, it's my son. He's 7. And Trump says, put me on speaker. And then he reads out the statement announcing that Vance is going to be the VP and asks Vance's son, what do you think of that? And his son says, it's good.
That makes Trump look good. Trump also has kids and grandkids. And I'm guessing I'm sure he's not changing diapers or whatnot, or doesn't want their sticky
Trump look better at dealing with Vance's kid than Vance is in that moment.
Yeah. Well, but also I would think that people love to judge who don't have kids. If you haven't told your kid to shut up a couple times, I don't think you're being a very good parent. Now, it could be harsh at that. I'm not saying the word is great, and the kid's 7, so that's harsh. But when you guys start getting to tweens and teenagers, I mean,
but again, the main argument here is between people who have kids versus people who don't. So the people who are mad about this are not people who have kids. The people who are mad about this are people who don't have kids, who see this as an opportunity for point scoring against Vance because he made them feel bad about themselves. And that's true. He's not capable of keeping the conversation on the structure because he has to assert that he's better than other people. He can't help it. So he has to insult people who don't have kids as part of making his argument. He's not capable of just making a nice structural argument about how we need to support young people. We need support for children. We should do things for children because he needs to dunk on other people. He has this obsessive need to dunk. And it's what makes him so unsuited to politics. He needs to insult entire demographic groups to feel better about himself. And he has to do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's also maybe he has a bit of Hillary in him because she called the Trump, they called the deplorables. Yeah. She was. That's what Hillary did, and a lot of people on the quote unquote left. So when people say left, when they think like Democratic Party, liberals, and this type of thing, they do have serious issues with the quote unquote working class. Yeah, they also want to come up. It's not just Vance who wants to come up with some weird thing. It's also them who want to come up with some. So they must be racist, or they must be backward. They must be this or that. That's the only reason they wouldn't vote for a Democrat.
I do give Hillary a certain amount of credit, though, because Hillary had policies. Hillary said that she wanted to do various things. Many of the things she wanted to do were openly horrible. She would defend these things. Hillary is the candidate of blow them up and kill them all. And she would say publicly that she wanted to go after countries. She was proud of killing Gaddafi. She made it clear that she was proud of it. Hillary took stances on things. I didn't agree with the stances. I didn't like the stances. Kamala Harris is not capable of running a campaign half as good as the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign.
Yeah. Which is what you said time and time again, they have to focus so much on the fact of feeling good about electing a female Black president. And how cool that is. They have to make it cool. They have to make it cool to vote for Kamala.
Because they have nothing else. They can't give you any other solitary reason. It's just you have to beat Trump because he's a fascist, a racist, a threat to democracy. And wouldn't it be cool to have women of color president? Those are the only 2 arguments anybody makes. The only 2. It's a fear argument and then a racist, sexist argument. That's it.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
all they've got.
So, of course, since we're capitalists, we got to make money. There's already miserable childless cat lady merchandise you can buy. Made in the USA, apparently, which makes sense. And I think that in a way it's funny, but just this gotcha who can market it and print it faster, rather than like you said, there's serious issues. Yeah, if you have if the current population's fertility rate is dropping, um, either you have to immigrate more people, and for right now, there's places with surplus working age people, but China doesn't have that anymore. India's population is also down, but there's certain countries that still are producing the women are having more than the average woman is having more than 2.1 or 2.2 kids. And of course, to be scientific, if there's any people watching out there, I realize that number is historical, depends also on infant mortality and mortality rates and healthcare and all kinds of stuff. But right now, it's about 2.1, 2.2 kids per adult woman if you want to maintain the whatever population you're at, whether it be China or Japan or Iceland or tribes or ethnicity, whatever it is.
And I don't have a problem with immigration, to be
No,
clear.
but if I could finish,
if you
yeah.
shift from this model where that's about
Mm.
trying to generate enough children and trying to create possibilities for people to have families,
Yeah.
and you shift in the direction of immigration, it
Mhm.
produces a lot of bitter people who are not able to do things that they want to do, who are upset that their life isn't going the way they'd like it to go. If they do have children anyway, they're raising their children in suboptimal circumstances and under poor conditions. And a lot of these people will resent that the government is helping immigrants come to the country rather than helping them do the things that they want to do in life. And it leads to upsurges of energy for the right,
Yeah.
which is beneficial to the right. So there has to be support for what the citizens of the country want to do with their own lives, for their own projects, goals, aspirations. If you don't support those projects and goals, it creates frustration. And the frustration results in resentment. And then that resentment can be directed against this or that group of people. And they refuse to think about it in these kinds of terms. They want to frame it entirely as a cultural thing. They don't want to consider that they have an economic model that produces political problems.
Yeah. No, and I think that this is the kind of, and also the thing about how people who want to, on both sides, not want to turn the immigration debate into a racial debate. And of course, yeah, you're bringing in people from different parts of the world, but it's also the fact that, and I think, and this is something I really want to do, I want to write about it or want to do a show on it, even though it's also quite hot, but who cares? Like, I don't touch hot topics. Is that the idea that we have to get to a point where we can talk about immigration without assuming people are trying to replace one group of people, or the other people who have issues with it are racists. And what's so interesting to me in a way is that we're supposed to, like, there's cultural diversity and isn't it fantastic? And we're supposed to have all this one, isn't it great how heterogeneous we are? Well, how do you think we got so heterogeneous? How do individual cultures actually come about? It's like for most of the world, for the majority of time, peoples, for lack of a better word, were fairly homogenous. Yeah, there was trade. Yeah, there could be famine. There could be all kinds of things, but there had to be a certain amount of homogeneity for a certain amount of time for there to be such a thing as Chinese or Indian or Nepalese or Mongolian or Icelander or any tribe at all. And if you mix everything together, it's people don't want to understand that it's not always that there's pluses and minuses, and those pluses and minuses aren't going to be the same for everybody. And still,
I don't have a problem with cultural mixing.
Yeah.
Cultural mixing is fine. The issue is that there is a lack of social and economic support. And the reason that there is
you're
that
fine with that.
neoliberalism has rotted the capacities of the
yeah.
state.
Yeah.
And so therefore the state is no longer able to raise enough revenue or create enough good jobs that pay enough for people to make families, stay home with their kids.
Yeah.
And so because you can't produce enough people, you are compelled to bring in more immigrants.
No, and I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that.
And it's not about replacement. It's about not having the resources because of marketization, not having the resources to support families in the country. And so trying to build a country which doesn't have the resources to support families, trying to keep its population growing without having any kind of base for family institutions.
No, I don't dispute that. What I'm saying is that when people say they feel alienated, they feel like they're losing their country, they're not just imagining that. I mean, things do change, and people can have a variety of feelings about it. What I'm just saying is that that we'll just, to take whatever culture there is or groups there are, they formed in a certain way. They didn't form by having increasing amounts of immigration.
Well, a lot of historical empires did have very high levels of population mobility. A lot of those trad empires had many, many different populations.
Okay, but I'm talking about if you look at China, for example, I'll just use China and India as an example. If you look at the percentage of the people who lived there who weren't born there, it's like 0.4%.
Yes, but China's an old-fashioned trad empire that has loads and loads of different groups within its territory. And has historically for a long time.
What I'm saying is that there's this notion that if you have with the UK in particular, and basically former colonial powers and imperial powers, for whatever, that when you have an influx of different populations, and then of course you have that presented to people in a particular way. I'm not saying there isn't narrative going on in here. What I'm saying is that I think it's very problematic to couch everybody that has any kind of concerns about what they would consider like cultural ramifications of immigration as this being terrible, being racist, being whatever. Now, I'm more concerned about what you just talked about the social economic, about all that stuff. Yeah. And of course, I've lived in a variety of places. I'm an American. I don't live in America. I don't have that issue. But I can imagine how I can understand. For example, I'll use an anecdote. When I first moved to Holland after I got married, and I was going to school at the University of Amsterdam, but we lived in Arnhem. Anyway, so I was talking to people, and Holland has a particular, like, it's very has a reputation. It's very open. It's very cosmopolitan. All this stuff. And of course, it's a small country, lots of trade. So you have to, a lot of people tend to know more than one language, et cetera, fine. And several times people would tell me, when I'd be talking about, like, oh yeah, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to, I'm at the University of Amsterdam because I did my graduate program there and my PhD there. Several times, people who in every other way would be quite, I was concerned to be quite liberal, would say, I used to like Amsterdam, and now it's more Black than Dutch, or it's more African than Dutch, or it's more, Indonesian or Algeria or whatever it is. Basically, when they meant Black, they just meant non-white. Yeah. And at first, I was like, Jesus, I didn't know what to. I was like, well, okay. I didn't know quite what to say about that. But there is the highest concentration of non-ethnic Dutch, I guess. So either way, first generation or second generation immigrants obviously is going to be in the cities, and that is a change. And I think that when we ignore that, we don't do ourselves any favors. And there's a reason why Han Wilders and his party have continued to gain power. Because
it's not mainly to do with cultural change. Yeah. It's mainly to do with the fact that the European economies have stagnated, that the living standards have stagnated, and that people. So you're saying that people think it's cultural
or lying, or they're wrong?
There's
people who would say
they're taking an easy available explanation for something that's more complicated, right? Yeah. Blaming it on bodies and the traits that are associated with bodies is easy. Now, I will say this: many European states are bad at integrating immigrant populations because they put immigrant populations too much in cities. They concentrate them too heavily in the metropoles, and this results in schools that are overwhelmingly one demographic or another.
Mhm.
And this makes it difficult for there to be the relevant
Yeah.
intermixing that's necessary for people to
Mhm.
understand that their neighbors are just like them. There's got to be
Mhm.
interaction. If you don't have
Mhm.
interaction, then people start to reify the cultural distinctions and treat the
Yeah.
groups as if they're fundamentally separate, essentially
Yeah.
separate and distinct.
Yeah.
So you do have to make sure intermixing happens.
Mhm.
And that's something that the state has done a poor job of in many of
Mhm.
these European countries. It's bad at making intermingling happen and cultural
Mhm.
exchange happen.
Mhm.
That said, the main reason that the right populist parties are successful is that the
Mhm.
European economies have been very, very poor performers for
Yeah.
more than 10 years now. There's been a lost
Mhm.
decade. It's been extremely
Mhm.
brutal. And this is because the
Mhm.
European Union rules are written for
Mhm.
rich people and for core, rich,
Mhm.
exporting states like Germany.
Mhm.
They don't benefit other demographics. And
Mhm.
as a consequence of this, the birth rates in all the European countries are very low. And
Mhm.
so there's been this continuous need to bring in more labor, which initially
Mhm.
they achieved by adding Eastern European states to the European Union. So then
Mhm.
you would get large influxes of workers from Poland, workers
Mhm.
from the Czech Republic, workers from Slovakia. And all of that makes sense because why shouldn't workers in those states, if they have the legal right to move to states where wages are higher, why shouldn't they move? It
Mhm.
is entirely sensible and reasonable for them to
Yeah.
do that. The only way you can prevent that from happening is by making large investments in the Eastern
Mhm.
European states
Mhm.
to raise the standard of living in those states. And that's
Mhm.
something that the standard of living has come up in Poland,
Mhm.
but slowly and gradually. And in the years
Mhm.
immediately following Polish accession to
Mhm.
the EU, there was a huge flow of Poles into
Mhm.
Western Europe. And that understandably frustrates people. Why is it that the state is
Mhm.
taking immigrants instead of supporting
Mhm.
our families, instead of making sure we have
Mhm.
enough money, instead of making
Mhm.
sure? I think that's all very understandable. But when we
Mhm.
start taking too seriously the
Mhm.
cultural
Mhm.
distinctions that people are making, I
Mhm.
think we got to realize there would be no problem
Mhm.
if there was adequate interaction going on from
Mhm.
early ages.
Mhm.
There would be no problem if there
Mhm.
was adequate economic support for families,
Mhm.
adequate economic support. People would be
Mhm.
very tolerant. Most people are very
Mhm.
tolerant and don't have
Mhm.
any kind of problem with their neighbor being a different
Mhm.
religion, looking different from them. Uh,
Mhm.
no problem. The
Mhm.
problem comes when there's insufficient
Mhm.
interaction, so people aren't familiar with their neighbor.
Mhm.
They don't know what's going on with their neighbor, and they're hearing stuff on the news or
Mhm.
on TV or on the internet about their
Mhm.
neighbor that's making them worried, right?
Mhm.
And then, secondly, if they're not getting the things they need and
Yeah.
they're feeling resentful and they're looking for somebody to blame, a neighbor that you
Mhm.
don't understand is a
Mhm.
convenient person to blame
Yeah.
things on.
Yeah.
I might be able to afford a house if there weren't so many of these people
Mhm.
coming. That's how
Mhm.
people will tend to think. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't frame it so much in terms of culture because I think
Mhm.
that that can result in this
Mhm.
drift into a more right wing way of framing the
Yeah.
problem. And we do want to push back against that and resist that. At the same time,
Mhm.
we shouldn't be saying that the people who are feeling resentment
Mhm.
belong in a basket of deplorables or
Yeah.
irredeemable or
Yeah.
carrying some kind of moral
Mhm.
problem with them, right? No,
Mhm.
those people are victims of neoliberalism. They're
Mhm.
being brutalized by neoliberalism and
Mhm.
barbarized by neoliberalism into embracing
Mhm.
positions that they would not be
Mhm.
embracing if they were living in a society that was functional.
Mhm.
And the failure is on the elites not to make the society functional in the relevant ways.
Mhm.
It's the state which is going, oh, we have to cater to rich people. We have to make sure that rich
Mhm.
people bring their jobs here so we can't raise wages. We have to
Yeah.
make sure that rich people don't sell
Mhm.
off their bonds so we can't raise tax rates.
Mhm.
We have to, we
Mhm.
have to, we have to. And nobody in politics is going,
Mhm.
we have to find a way to
Mhm.
deal with these enormous flows of money, to deal
Mhm.
with the structural power of rich people to move their money from place to place based on whether they like or don't like the policies. It's
Mhm.
taking away the policy autonomy of the states. It's
Mhm.
taking away the capacity of people to make relevant political
Mhm.
demands. There's no one they can make a demand to who has the capacity to help them because these
Mhm.
flows are over determining all of the decisions that the European states are making.
Mhm.
We have to do something about these flows.
Mhm.
That's what it really comes down to. So,
Mhm.
yes, I am, of course, opposed to casting people in the basket of deplorables or moralizing about
Mhm.
racism. I love people and I don't have a problem
Mhm.
with people who
Mhm.
have views that are, in my view, wrong, incorrect, misunderstandings. But
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that we can't say that the view is wrong, incorrect, or misunderstanding.
No.
And I think one of our problems that we've been
Mhm.
having is that as a it's become harder and harder to acknowledge that something is a
Mhm.
flaw without blaming the
Mhm.
one who has it. We've become
Yeah.
very bad at hating the sin, loving the sinner. We've gotten
Yeah.
worse and worse and worse at that culturally.
Yeah. No, and I was saying, but it's just that it's just when I start to and maybe it was easier for me to be less judgmental when because I was an outsider in this country, but I was kind of a quote unquote good immigrant. You know, no one had any problem with me, and everyone was always so great, like, oh, you're really trying with the Dutch language. And some people would say, unlike some groups who don't try to, wink, wink. I was kind of like, it was this like as this high valued, lovely immigrant. I'm quite sure it had to do with something about me. But when I heard it there, I was like, well, okay. And then they have this some of their language is great. They call it Zwarte School, so black schools, Zwarte School. And when we moved from Arnhem to outside of Rotterdam, and we moved to the southern edge of Rotterdam, which has a lot of ethnic, we'll just say diverse population. Yeah. So we lived that like 2 or 3 years where we're probably a minority. So white, whatever. Dutch was probably maybe a parity or minority in the community that we lived in. So my kids went to school, at least my son went to school the first few years in what they call a Zwarte School, which means it has a lot of non-white Dutch people that go there. But it also means that school gets a lot of money. Just kind of maybe the reverse in the state's situation that would at least probably not now, probably not under the current administration, but when we were there, quote unquote Zwarte School, they were trying to assimilate and kind of try to maybe make up for what had gone on in the past. So there was a lot of so the quote unquote what they call literally would call black schools in the regular talk.
The objective needs to be to integrate the school.
Yeah.
Giving money to a school that's not integrated doesn't solve the problem.
Well,
you have to actually
I did my part. I did my part.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Great picture.
Just oh, we're going to have a black school.
Yeah, but hold on, Benjamin. Let me show you something.
That?
Well, that's what I'm telling you. The shocking thing, because I've been hearing before I moved to Holland how it's so open, it's so this and that, and then people are like, oh, where are you? Oh, I'm like, oh, we're gonna to Hoogvliet, so it's the southern Rotterdam. Oh, your kids will go to a your how your kinderen naar een zwarte school dan? Oh, yeah, I'm like, what? And I had to ask my friend at school Dutch. I'm like, why is everyone saying that my kids are going to go to a black school? I don't understand. And then she explained it to me, and I was like, well, okay. And I think it was probably like half. I never really counted, but it was a diverse school. Yeah. And there's this great picture of my son's, I think from like his 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade picture. And it's like half the class is not, doesn't look like people think Dutch would look like. And half the class. And so I would share this picture with my friends back home. They'd be like, I could tell they wanted to say something, but they didn't know how to say it. Like, why are there so many? And then I could say, well, they go to a Zwarte School. And then it leads to this conversation. I find it really like, but there's some terms in Dutch that are so like really like, whoa. Like I thought, well, at least they don't hide it. But it was
one
just
thing about the States.
And as soon as I would say where I lived, because I was telling people, and when we were moving from Arnhem to Hoogvliet in the south of Rotterdam, the first thing they would say, "Oh, it's Zwarte School." Crazy. And then I thought, well, all right. So,
yeah, when you get out of the big cities. Immigrant populations are much more easily assimilated because you don't have very, very large constituencies from any one particular country. Mm-hmm. If you spread immigrants out over the whole territory, then there has to be intermingling. My high school in Indiana, we had some immigrants from Latin America. We had some immigrants from India. We had some immigrants from the Middle East, some immigrants from East Asia, but not very many. From any one place. So if you took all of the people who came from immigrant backgrounds and you added them all up, it would be a significant percentage. But each individually, very small. So it wasn't possible for someone to have their whole friend group be people who grew up in the same kind of household. You had to have friends. You inevitably had friends who came from different families whose parents had come from different places in the world. And so it was very obvious to us that these other kids were just like us, and these families were not that different from us. That was very clear.
Mhm.
And
No, I
in
mean, it
these
was a good
cities where you have
experience. Yeah.
big constituencies,
Mhm.
then there tends to be separation
Mhm.
in terms of people hanging
Mhm.
out.
Mhm. Oh, no, I don't know if you're familiar with Oxford, but it's crazy. During right after COVID, I signed up. I'd heard they were having a really hard time with, well, they call them supply teachers here, but we would call them substitute teachers. So I thought, well, I'll throw my name in the thing if they need, if I, because I was in between, I was looking for a new academic post. I hadn't decided to on purpose stop looking for an academic post at that times, but I thought, well, in between, I'll help out, do my part. And um, the two schools that needed the supply teachers the most were in Oxford, but on the edge of Oxford. Um, and I would go there, and they were almost completely uh, minority groups, maybe a handful of white kids. And I was like, and but then you go, but if you would literally go like a kilometer in a different direction, where you have like the private schools and the very fancy, then it totally, well, you would have some, because obviously the professors and the people in at Oxford have there's more diversity there, but it was. And every once in a while, when I would go into a school that wasn't so obviously segregated, it was just night and day. It was, and just, but literally in that small part, from in and around Oxford, so a mile can make a huge difference. It was
Yeah.
really odd. I was not expecting that at all. And then people would say,
You got to
well,
have
and
intermingling.
then people would say, like, well, we need you at this school. And they would try to tell you stuff without actually telling you, like, well, you're going to have a lot of this and that, and try to be this and that. And, behavioral thing and all this, and keep in mind what their home life is probably like. Someone told me that once. I was like, okay. I mean, I try to have the same expectations for everybody. Of course, when you're coming in for a day or two, it's not like, you're just trying to make sure that the room doesn't catch on fire. But it was just the things you get told. It's like, well, yeah, don't expect too much. Like, okay. I mean,
It's one of the valuable points of diversity.
mm,
Literally, having a diverse student population
mm,
results in intermingling, which is
mm,
good for all concerned.
yeah.
Helps everybody get used to everybody else from a young age.
Mm.
When
Well,
that's
there's not a lot of that going on in
succeeding, it's
Oxford.
perfectly fine.
Well, I mean, if you look at the aggregate, so if you would look at Oxfordshire and look at the ethnic breakdown, you'd be like, oh, it's really diverse. But if you actually go into the various
Yeah.
schools, quite a different story.
Yeah,
I was
there's no
like, whoa.
diversity if you have everybody in an institution
Mm,
looking one particular way or another.
mm,
And the point at which you need the
mm,
diversity, it's not so much when you're an adult, it's when you're a kid. It's
mm,
when you're a kid that you form your perceptions of what people
mm,
are like. That's when you need to be exposed to people. It's in
mm,
the primary schools and the secondary schools.
mm.
We treat
No.
it in terms
Yeah.
of a job competition all the time.
Mm,
It's something that needs to occur very early on in life.
mm,
You should have friends when you're a kid from lots of different backgrounds. And that
mm.
should be facilitated by making sure that there are not too many people of any one background in a school. So people can't just hang out with people from the same background.
Yeah, that's a political minefield as well. Anyway, but yeah, so I've had quite, so first of all, when my kids went to a quote unquote zwarte school in Holland for 3 4 years before we shifted to England, and then my time doing supply teaching in certain schools around Oxfordshire has been quite, oh good, I thought my mouse went dead, has been quite eye-opening in terms of rhetoric versus a reality from the Labor Party, and also. Okay, so let's see before we have to leave. Oh, nah. Oh no, I know I will. I will let you look at this one. Um, is that the one I wanted to look at? Oh no, I like this one. So Trump is. This is Mary Harrington. She writes for Earn Heard and other things. She's British. Trump is weird feels like a risky attack line for a political ideology whose core mission is the abolition of the normal. So I'm sure you picked up on this, like who's weird. So like I think it was because of the Vance thing. So like people were saying like Vance is weird. So they got into this competition about who's weird, Republicans or
Yeah.
Democrats. And I think Mary's
I-
right. I don't think the Democrats want to get into the who's weirder.
The answer is that everybody's weird because we don't agree on how to live anymore. We're all so different from each other. We're all in different parts of the internet, different fandoms, different niches. We don't share a common culture anymore in the way that we used to. So everybody's weird, and everybody rubs everybody the wrong way, and everybody seems a little bit like a freak to everybody else. And that's okay.
But some people are. But some people are legit. I mean, there's different kinds of weird. So people were trying to so people would love on the left camp would go and find people from various MAGA people, like some grandma that says has a teacher that says Trump can grab me by my pussy or something, and say, look, this is weird. And yeah, but there's a difference between like funny weird and like weird. And I think the left, just in terms of some of the more, especially like it seems like the more just transgressing a boundary in and of itself becomes some sort of an accomplishment. So the grandmas that have Trump can grab me by the pussy, yeah, that's weird. But I'm like, I think it's kind of
Well, this is the thing.
I wouldn't want my grandma to wear that T-shirt, but compare that to somebody who has who's like walking around with his dick out at a pride parade with a furry. I mean, who's give me the grandma with the Trump can grab me by the pussy shirt over that any day.
Well, nobody involved in this election is walking around with their dick out, but at least not literally.
Yeah.
But I do think that we have reached a point where there is so little agreement on how people ought to be behaving or what is acceptable or appropriate behavior that the word weird can just be thrown at anybody now. Yeah. And it sticks on all of us. And just a short time ago, the liberals were very pro weird. I mean, remember the whole Keep Portland Weird thing a few years back? That's the thing, is that it's their weird. Yeah, their weird is good. The other people's weird is bad. And right. I brought up the furries and all this stuff, not because I think that Kamala Harris or her husband are furries. I mean, who knows? But it wasn't just comparing the candidates; it was comparing their quote unquote bases. Yeah. So a lot of people on the right like pagan kind of festival stuff. A lot of the Nietzschean pagan right. They like headdresses. There's not that much difference between them and furries, really. Yeah, there's not that much difference, but they each would think that the other is totally different.
Well, the furry is sexual. The other one can go both ways, but we don't want to get too off track.
If you ask the furries, they have different views about that. Some of them view it as a sexual thing, and some of them do not. Not all furries yiff, and not all yiffers are.
Look at you,
furries.
Look at you, Varys. Right? I only know. Again, I don't know any personally. I just know about the people who are furry. People who have furries or identify as furry tend to take issue with my account.
That's because of your particular set of positions on the trans stuff. I'm sure many of them don't agree with it. But I try to be a peacemaker when it comes to the culture, where I want to get people talking about the economy, talking about the flows, talking about the common problems we all face, regardless of what our particular cultural bent is. It's okay, whether you want to have children or you don't want to have children. It's not about who's better, who's worse. It's about can we have a structure that lets people do the things?
Yeah, and I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. But I would say that pretending that men can be women and vice versa is not a cultural issue, and it has serious It causes serious material, real world problems. But on the other stuff, sexual stuff, whatever people do with other consenting individuals, have at it. It's none of my business. I just think the furry mask would be stinky. I just think the furry mask should do research on medical
questions, and they should take seriously the conclusions of the research that they do, rather than have ideological positions that they stick to no matter what. People should read and be open about. Well,
also, if someone's trying to tell you that 2 + 2 is 5, you should be suspicious of that. Walter Kim. He's a cool, or Kern. I always want to call him Kim. He's the guy who does he's
Matt Taibbi's
sidekick. Well, not sidekick, but friend. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he says he's talking about Kamala. Prosecutor is not an American cultural archetype. Outlaw is. The political narrative architects fucked up. Trying to
Well,
figure out
yeah.
she's a prosecutor. She's a tough on crime.
Yeah, there's a kind of two different elements in my reaction to this. One is the kind of, I think he's got a point. I think that probably in the United States, being an outlaw or a rogue is politically a stronger kind of aesthetic outfit than being a cop or being a prosecutor. And I think the assumption that prosecutor going after criminal would be to the benefit of prosecutor is not obviously the case in the United States. But also, secondly, we are just all reduced to talking about marketing all the time, aren't we? We're all just talking about aesthetics and marketing and guessing about what other people want or what other people like, because we're all so different from each other and so weird that we have a very difficult time now imagining what other people are thinking. There's this huge industry now in American politics that's just about trying to figure out how to market to people that you don't understand, that aren't like you. Load of this going on now.
Yeah. Okay, let's see.
Subaltern whispering, I call it.
Yeah. Jean Barak, we already talked about this. Who's running the show? We might go back to this if we have time because it's getting international. Let's see. Oh, Michael Tracy. Michael Tracy. Kamala nominated today by virtual vote without having placed a single policy position anywhere on her website. Just a personal bio, fundraising solicitations, and merchandise. She really is a historic candidate. Historic in the shocking lack of scrutiny she's been subjected to. I think you've
sure that's certainly true. Of course, if the delegates are comfortable voting for her without her having to present any of that, well, it says something about them, doesn't it? Because she has to be nominated by the delegates. The delegates are the ones who had to vote for her at that virtual vote. So they clearly don't care. The Democratic Party delegates don't care that she doesn't stand for anything or doesn't have a platform. People go, well, this isn't a process. I mean, these are the delegates. These are the people that in the primary are picked through the primary procedure to go to the convention. And these people are slavish and deferential enough in their attitudes to the party leadership that they will just do whatever the party leadership pushes them to do, more or less. It's not that there wasn't a process. It's that there is a process, and the Democratic Party delegates are sheep who do whatever they're told. That's what we learned. Like Nancy Pelosi made a point, anyone else is free to run. And this is true. You could run. One of these governors could have said, I don't endorse Kamala Harris. I think that she is incompetent and useless, and I'm going to run. Not a single one of them did. They all endorsed because they're all scared of the party leadership. Whole party is just held in terror by Pelosi and Schumer and Obama. I've been impressed by their level of unity. The party unity in the Democratic Party was much stronger than I thought it would be. I mean, you remember, I thought Biden might stick around.
No, you thought you figured he, unless he keeled over, you thought he would stick it out. Yeah.
Because I thought they couldn't possibly have enough unity to all agree on one person to replace him. For one, I thought there would be some who would stand up for him. And then for two, I thought that there would be splits in who they would think the alternative should be. There's an incredible amount of cohesion in that party. And that's the thing that we should take away and learn from this. That party is much more cohesive than I thought it was, and I think than many other people thought it was,
including this "quote unquote" squad and the progressive wing and all that.
Yeah, the only people who were caught defending Biden during that period where they were getting ready to push him out were Bernie and AOC.
And I think Ilhan Omar also, or she complained about how the leaks. They didn't.
Yeah, the squad. Yeah.
So okay, here's Glenn Greenwald. He's saying something similar, but he's talking about the media. Liberal pundits are herd animals. They always read from the same script. They unite to insist on one point. It's a lie to say Biden is addled, and then change to the opposite the next day. Biden must go. They're mindless drones who recite whatever they're programmed to say. And he's referring to, I don't know if it's a New York Times piece called, I was a Kamala Harris skeptic. Here's how I got coconut pilled.
Well, it's very difficult now to write for these
coconut
elite
used to
liberal...
be a racist thing? Like it was like white on the inside, brown on the
Oh,
outside. Wasn't that the
I think you're right
coconut?
about that. I think you're right about
Yeah,
that.
because people
Yeah,
call
I
Richie
think it,
Sunak and Suella Braverman coconuts over here.
yes, of course, in her case, it's a
I mean,
reference to the quote from
yeah.
her mother about falling out of a coconut tree. But yes,
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, you've heard that line. You didn't just fall out of a
Yeah,
coconut
yeah.
tree. You have a
Okay, okay, yeah,
context.
okay.
All
Yeah,
of
true,
that.
true. Sorry.
That's what
Yeah.
it's a reference to. But you're right that
Okay.
it historically has had that other meaning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that one of the things people have to realize is that as there are so many people who want to write for a living,
Mm-hmm.
this reduces the freedom of everybody who writes for a living to write what they want. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
write for the Atlantic or the New York Times or what have you, the editors have enormous amount of control
Mm-hmm.
over what you can write, over what you can say, because there are so many people who want to do these jobs. The small number of remaining decent, lucrative jobs in the media for writers,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much of a hyper competition for them that the editors exercise a completely totalitarian control over what these people can say. And if the
Yeah.
editors have a particular political stance, and as it happens, the editors of these papers and of these media companies
Mm-hmm.
are pretty uniform in their politics these days, it becomes extremely difficult to get a piece in one of these outlets that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
conform. And they will always pretend it's about quality of the piece, quality of the argument. They always make merit arguments. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the pieces that they do accept are not very good written pieces. They're just in line with the dominant view. They're not insightful. They don't contain anything new. They are attempts to get up the search engine algorithm. And some people have talked about this, how the writing that they have done, even for relatively prominent outlets, has become increasingly driven by SEO concerns.
Mm-hmm.
The quality is just plummeting everywhere as a result.
Well, and I hate the clickbait because we only have so much time on the planet, and so you'll look at a headline like, oh, and it's just like basically the headline's the whole thing. Maybe it's a picture, or it's just they're just self-referential. So there's a couple of articles, and then you realize they're all referencing the same thing, and I'm just like, people. I also don't like it, but this is a different issue. I also don't like it when when academics republish their essays as a book, but they change the title to such a fact you don't really realize until you've gotten into it that this is just these articles that I've already read that are just kind of maybe they slapped on an introduction.
Oh, they've been pushed into it, because they have to
why
publish.
did I buy this? I've already read this. Or people who write the same article, and I understand with the ref and the push to get numbers. I'm like, you basically this is like maybe 10% of this is different from what I've read otherwise.
Yeah,
and it's one thing if you have institutional access and just wasted some of your time. You're actually to buy some of this stuff and be like, dude, this is basically the same article.
Well, and a lot of places don't want you to write something that's too heavily dependent on citing your previous work. So if you've written something and not enough people have read it because there's too much that's coming out for anybody to read or cite, right? If people didn't notice what you wrote previously, it's as if it doesn't exist. So if you were to write the same argument and cite your old piece, they would go, you're just citing yourself. So people end up repeating. Yeah. It's going on in every professional space. The academy, the media, wherever you go, this is the problem. There's too many people for the number of decent roles, decent jobs that pay decently. And this is giving the tastemakers and the decision makers enormous amounts of power over what gets through.
Okay. So here's something, and this is from, I don't know if you're familiar with Due Dissidents. They're a lefty podcast. I kind of do news commentary. I follow them. They're funny. But he made a proclamation. Keaton Weiss from Due Dissidents he was about, and this is what you talked about earlier, what we talked about when Trump said that Kamala wasn't always black. This was so they're on their shows a few days ago. Today Trump is essentially saying Kamala isn't black, she's Indian. Looks to me like the Democrats laid a trap and conservatives rocked right into it, unable to resist the meme bait that is the Harris campaign. So what he's saying is that I think Keaton is attributing kind of maybe a bit of 3D chess to the Democrats, saying that saying that the reason they can maybe they're not possibly this ridiculous, and the reason why they're having white dudes for Kamala and white women for Kamala and all this stuff is because they want to bait the Republicans into commenting on it, so that makes them look racist or makes them look whatever. And it's the same thing about Trump picking up on saying that picking
do
up on
woke
how
stuff to inspire an anti-woke
yeah.
response.
Yeah. So, what do you think about this? Do you think the Dems are going all out with white dudes for Obama and white women? No, not Obama. Sorry, Freudian slip. White dudes for Kamala and white women for Kamala and all this stuff because they're trying to bait the Republicans into commenting on it, on her race.
I don't think that's the main function of it. I think this is just genuinely how Democrats think and like to organize. And I think that it's not as if there's one particular way in which it will be received positively or negatively. I think that there are many different constituencies that react to this stuff in different ways. I think there's way too many divisions in society for people to make claims like it was a disaster or it was a great success, right? Some people are going to view the stuff that he said in that meeting as very funny, and they're going to think it was great and that he was tough and that he withstood pestering from a journalist who was hostile to him. And other people are going to think it was racist and despicable. And these people are never going to agree about what happened. And it will never be proven because in all likelihood, the polls will probably not move significantly in response to the thing one way or another. It will never be proven even that the remarks have any kind of effect. Because most of the time when we have a story that 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we would have thought would change the race or produce a huge swing. You get maybe 1 point.
Grab them by the pussy.
Next week. 1 point difference on average the next week. Maybe. Maybe. I mean, even relative to 2016. In 2016, there was a little bit of an up and down to Trump's numbers. And there was some movement. And I remember his favorability rating would move from maybe around 35% to 40, 42, depending on what was going on. So there's kind of a 7-point range that he was in, he'd move within. Now we're talking about really small, just a point here or there moves. Oftentimes people act like, oh, this thing that was said will totally change everything. And then you look at the polling, 1 point maybe the next week, if that.
Well, yeah,
none
and
of
it's
this
also
stuff really changes anybody's mind anymore.
Well, but and it does. It just kind of gives content and grist for the mill. Yeah. So for the online stuff and for any kind of commentary, you need something.
Well, and you have to pretend that everything matters. And because nobody does anything in the United States anymore, nobody actually does anything. We have to pretend that everything everybody says is so important. It's all so important. Oh, he said this. Oh my goodness. Oh, it's harmful. We have to act like words are harmful all the time. Because nobody does anything. So if we admitted that nobody does anything and that the system is moribund and incapable of action increasingly, then this would cause us to think maybe we should get rid of it or make something new, right? So instead, because we can't face that kind of possibility, that's too much. We're cowardly 21st century people who are scared of that. So we instead go, oh my goodness, they're saying things. Oh my goodness, the body that is occupying the chair, it will have this color or that pigment, or it will have these genitals or those genitals, as if any of this makes up for the fact that absolutely nothing happens ever anymore. Nothing.
All right. Well, on that note, Benjamin Varys Studebaker, this has been the second Game of Thrones political roundup. We're going to try to do one of these every twice a week. Not twice a week, Jesus, that would be fun though. But I wouldn't subject Benjamin to that. Twice a month between now and when the election in the United States is accepted, because who knows, it could it could draw out like the last time. I mean. Well, except like we know the results, and then neither side has. It seems like they might huff and puff, but there's really nothing they can do about it. I do have some stuff that was more about Venezuela and about Bibi Netanyahu's address to Congress, but that would be getting into foreign policy. And I think since we've been just talking about primarily with a bit of sojourns into the to compare immigration, the cultural arguments around culturalization or moralization of immigration, I did bring up the UK and Holland because I've lived in both those places and born and raised in the States. But other than that, it's been pretty focused on the States. So I don't see any reason in making our neurons going a different direction. Do you have anything you want to leave with us at this? Any words of wisdom, any axiom, any tidbit on this episode of Game of Thrones? Political
I
roundup.
don't think I have a whole lot else here, but thanks, guys, for listening. And hopefully nothing so terrible happens over the next couple of weeks that makes it impossible to endure.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Can we do one more comment? Someone had one more comment. Is that all right?
Yeah. This is a great comment.
Yeah. So much, because thank you, Putin's shirt, by the way. I like it when people comment, although sometimes it makes me go a bit kooky because I'm a one-woman show, but we do the best we can. Putin's shirt says, so much creativity goes into the producing the theater known as U.S. politics. Imagine if all that effort and energy were applied to improving our nation. U.S. priorities are just evil. Oh, that's good, because I also want, and I forgot to do this. I forgot to find a good encapsulation, because there's a lot of good and evil talk coming in now about who's good, who's evil.
Yeah. I don't think people who do nothing can count as good or evil. People who do nothing are just neutral. Their, D&D alignment is neutral. They do nothing.
Mm-hmm. But I think you would agree with this. I don't know if you want to say anything about what Putin's shirt said, but
yeah, no, there's a fair point about there being something evil in manufacturing these excuses for doing nothing. Yeah. No, I like the comment. I just am always thinking about how little happens and just how little anybody's life has ever improved by any of this. Just everybody's slowly getting crushed while things get just a little bit worse all the time.
Yeah, the what is it? And I can't think ananymore. The frog in the pot. We don't realize
Hillary was committed.
We don't realize we're being cooked until it's too late because we're too entertained.
I miss Hillary Clinton's avowed, commitment to evil. Hillary Clinton. You would hear stories about things she had done that were just explicitly evil. I miss that. Because at least that had a content. At least things were occurring.
Well, even Madeleine Albright, when she was asked if the 500,000 excess deaths in Iraq because of sanctions were worth it, and she's like, "Yeah, they were."
At least that is, okay. Hey, you made a decision. It had consequences. You own it. There is something respectable about a politician who owns the horrible shit that they do.
Yeah. All right. Well, Benjamin, thank you for joining and being a good sport about Varys. I did mean it in the political acumen sense, because Varys was, I think from what I remember from that character, again, I didn't read the books. He's someone I'd want to be as an advisor. I don't know if I would completely trust him. You seem trustworthy. Varys, but who knows, when push comes to shove, we're all cracked vessels. Yeah, that's what Cornel West tells us. Okay, well, thank you very much. I really enjoy our time together. Look out for the clips, people. Please do like and subscribe. I will, at the end of this show, put Benjamin's actual bio slide on with his website, so you can go check him out. Please do like and subscribe. I'll have clips coming out from this also, because I now know how to do that little app thing. Thanks, Benjamin, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, unless we get hit by an asteroid or something, or you have a better option. It's also possible. Okay, see you later. All right, so this has been a Game of Thrones political roundup with special guest, friend of the show, Benjamin Varys Studebaker, for the purposes of the Game of Thrones political roundup. We'll be back with another episode of this. Not next Saturday, but the Saturday after, unless, barring any major schedule changes. Please do like and subscribe. Morbid Symptoms Media is completely independent, so nobody's, so we're need the likes and the subscribes. And if anybody can afford to be a Patreon or to buy us a coffee, that's great. It allows me to focus on this project in terms of podcasts and Substack articles, etc., and also working with other people, other contributors behind the scenes and on the scenes. So With that note, I will leave you with the promotion video on this bi-monthly Game of Thrones, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.